Hey, gang, it's Mr. Cassidy and my friend Mr. Bones in the storage closet with another episode of Science Videos. This one is all about wolves. Why? Because wolves are awesome, and also because it's our mascot. We're the Jefferson Wolves. And so we're going to talk about them today and how awesome they are. This slide is so epic with these two wolves howling at the full moon. Such a cool poster. I think I'm going to buy one for the class. And I got some headphones on Mr. Bones because he got so creeped out when I played this for him earlier that I brought in these headphones because these wolves are going to start howling. And it's kind of creepy. It's kind of putting us in the mood for Halloween. Starts with just one wolf, and all the other ones get up. They start listening. Their ears go forward. There's another one. Oh, now they're all going. It's okay, Mr. Bones. It's okay. It's just a video. Don't worry. Listen to that. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, Mr. Bones is, I can hear his ribs rattling. He's so freaked out. So we'll move on. But wolves howling, that's how they talk to each other. Each wolf has its own different howl. It helps them define their territories. And they can, it's a whole language. They can say a bunch of different stuff to each other through those howls. And wolves are cool because they are social animals, meaning they live in these big packs. And the packs are a male and a female, a mama and a papa, and then basically like a few generations of their kids. So, and then once in a while, it's like an auntie or an uncle, like a brother or sister of the top male and female. And then occasionally, very rarely, it's just an unrelated wolf will join the pack. But that doesn't happen too often, I guess. Usually these are all related animals. And so they live in these packs and they hunt together. It's what makes them such great predators, is because they can coordinate and cooperate these hunts and take down really big animals. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, they're social animals. They live in groups as opposed to solitary animals like cougars and other cats. Foxes are kind of solitary. Wolverines live by themselves, except just to breed and make babies, basically. But otherwise, they live alone. And, play in wolves is super important. It helps them kind of figure out
Often
who's boss and
comprised of
stuff.
6 to 10 wolves, packs are cohesive units that hunt and live together. Within the packs, each wolf has a unique personality. To maintain order among them, a male and a female dominate the pack as alphas. They establish a strict hierarchy and are the only wolves in the pack to breed.
So yeah, when you see wolves, or even dogs do this, they kind of play fight with each other. That's really important time together because it sort of like establishes who's boss and who's stronger, but it also brings them closer together. Makes them better friends and stuff like that. And a lot of different animals do play like this. Crows and ravens play. Orcas play together. Usually, animals that live in big groups like wolves do have kind of an element of play in their lives, which is pretty cool. Okay, so here we go. So wolves work together as a pack, sometimes with ravens. How about that? To hunt really big animals. And those really big animals include buffalo, these big guys down here, caribou, so those guys on the right, those are the same as reindeer, deer. Single wolves can hunt deer all by themselves. They can do it better in groups, and then elk over there. But they also eat small stuff like rabbits and mice and birds and snakes and fish and salmon, like we saw last week with the salmon video. But when they get together in these big groups, they can hunt really big animals. And they do that by like cooperating and coming up with like kind of a strategy. So like maybe they'll start chasing like this big herd of caribou, and then they'll get one all by itself away from the rest of the herd, and they'll kind of like they'll try to like chase it towards some trees, say over there, and then there'll be another wolf waiting in the trees, and that wolf will jump out and get the caribou. So they work together and kind of can ambush um, prey that way. Okay, so get this: wolves and ravens work together to hunt. So sometimes wolves have really good senses of smell, like dogs. They can smell really well, and that's primarily how they figure out where the deer, the caribou, or the buffalo are. But sometimes the wind might be blowing in the wrong direction for them and be blowing the smell away from them. So then they can rely on ravens who are flying up above, and they can see everything. And the ravens will talk to the wolves and tell them where the prey is. Now, why would they do that? Why would they help the wolves out? Well, it's because after the wolves make the kill, ravens get some leftovers, and so the ravens get a little meal out of it, and so everybody wins except for the elk. There, the elk was the loser, but everybody else is pretty happy. Now, this is kind of anti-intuitive, but this is really interesting because wolves generally hunt kind of the weakest members of a herd. So you got all these caribou down here. These are all caribou down in this big wetlands. Say a pack of wolves starts running into the caribou, hunting them. They'll go after like the slowest and the weakest caribou and get them away from the others, and that's who the wolves will kill and eat. And in that way, it helps keep the caribou herd strong because they're only taking the weak animals, and that means that the stronger animals that survive the hunt are the ones that reproduce and make more babies, and that keeps the caribou herd stronger. So, in kind of a strange way, wolves are really good for keeping caribou herds healthy. And yeah, here's a nice big male caribou with those big antlers, and they're kind of covered in fuzz. I don't know if you can see that, but down here below it, that fuzz is falling off, and it's bright red, really beautiful. Okay, now this is wild. So back in the 1990s, way before you kids were born, and I was maybe a teenager, I remember when this happened. Um, some people they reintroduced wolves back to Yellowstone Park. And Yellowstone Park is this real big national park over in Wyoming and Montana. And wolves had been gone for about 60 years. They had been hunted out by humans. Humans had killed all the wolves in the area, and there weren't any left. And so some scientists thought that bringing back wolves would be a good idea. It'd be healthy for the ecosystem. And so they brought in a few packs of wolves from Canada. And it was a really big deal. Here's National Geographic. It's the cover story. They did a bunch of different articles and a bunch of different research on it. My friend John actually spent a couple winters in Yellowstone researching wolves, and I got to go out there and ride around on a snowmobile with them and check out these different wolf kill sites. And we'd ski around, looking at wolves and stuff. It was really, really fun. So people are still doing a lot of really neat research on wolves in Yellowstone. But essentially what happened is, and here's a real simple sort of graphic that explains this, but over on the left, this left column, without wolves, that's right here, got this red circle with an X through it. Without wolves, there's a lot of deer and elk. These are elk cartoons, I guess. And with all those elk, they ate a ton of shrubs and trees and grasses. Okay, and especially around the rivers, they just kind of hang out in the rivers all day, and that's where a lot of the real delicious willows and alder and cottonwood, all these delicious little shrubs that elk and deer like, they'd hang out there all day because there's no reason to leave. There was no wolves to chase them around or kill them, so there was nothing that was really hunting them. Cougars would, but cougars only take deer. They can't really take elk. But without wolves, the plant life really got hammered. It got eaten down just to nubbins. Okay, bring in a few wolves. What happens? They eat a bunch of elk. They put pressure on the elk. They stop hanging out on the streams all day because they got to keep moving and they can't just laze around and snack on willow shoots. And the elk populations went way down. And what does that mean? More plants, more shrub and tree growth. Okay, this is where it gets wild. So this is kind of a complicated graphic, but let's try to figure it out. So you bring back wolves. There's less elk and less deer. That means there's more willow, more cottonwood, more aspen. Okay, and that ends up meaning more beavers because beavers eat all these things. And what do beavers do? They make little lodges. They make little dams that slows down the river and makes it go different ways and makes little pools and stuff. And what are those pools and slower water good for? They're good for fish. They're good for amphibians, both of which lay their eggs and like to live in places like that. They're good for birds. A lot of shorebirds nest in kind of like wetlands and slow-moving water areas. And more aspen and cottonwood and willow too means more birds because they like to nest in things like that. Okay, and then up here, when you bring back wolves, there's less coyotes. Wolves will attack and kill coyotes. And that means more mice because coyotes eat a lot of mice. What happens when you have more mice? You get more hawks. So this is like a big game of dominoes that happens when you take out or you bring back an apex predator. That's what they call a wolf. Is like the very top of the food chain is called an apex predator. So they can have really big changes when you take away or bring back apex predators. And so when you bring back the beavers, the rivers get way more complicated. The area around the rivers get way more lush. This is what it looks like without wolves on the left. This is what it looks like bringing the wolves back on the right. You get way more types of animals, more complex dynamic rivers, which are better for fish and amphibians and birds. And it's just it's how it used to be basically. This is how Yellowstone looked way back in the day before people killed off all the wolves, and so it looks the same as it did a long time ago. Okay, wolves in winter. This is a really neat concept too. So in the wintertime, when there's not a lot of food around because there's snow everywhere, and this is in places like up north in Canada and Yellowstone and Eastern Washington and stuff, when everything's buried in snow and frozen for like a long time, wolves are the only animals around that can hunt and bring down big animals still, like elk and deer. And when they kill those animals, they eat what they can, but then they leave a lot of leftovers. And those leftovers are really important in wintertime for birds like ravens and magpies. These are magpies down here, these birds with the white on their wings. And even little teeny birds. This is a little mountain chickadee that's chewing on the bones because bones have minerals in them and little teeny bits of flesh. All that stuff is really important for smaller critters in the middle of winter when there's not a lot of food around. And foxes and squirrels and even mice will come to these kill sites and get a little snack. And it's really important and helps a lot of the other animals get through the winter. Okay, you remember this slide? This is from last week when we were talking about salmon. There was those really neat wolves up in BC that up in British Columbia in Canada that live and eat salmon up there. So I'm bringing back this slide, and we're going to talk about these wolves from the Great Bear Rainforest. Now, these wolves swim between islands, sometimes as long as a mile between islands. They'll swim in the ocean. They hunt in the intertidal. That means they're down in the tide pools eating crabs and barnacles and clams. It says they eat otters too. I don't know how they catch otters, but somehow they catch otters, which is kind of sad, but circle of life. They eat fish, of course. And remember last week I mentioned that they eat fish brains because they're super nutritious. There's also like a parasite in other parts of fish meat that's bad for wolves. So somehow they've figured that out, and they mostly just eat fish brains. Pretty awesome. They also eat deer and mice too in these areas, but they eat a lot of stuff from the ocean, even whales. This is a whale right above my head there, a whale that washed up on the beach, and a wolf is having a whale snack, having a blubbery little treat. And then over here on the left, there's two whales sniffing around a dead porpoise that got washed up. So these wolves eat really wild stuff compared to those wolves that live inland and eat caribou and bison and things like that. So just different culture, basically, different type of wolf culture out on the coast. Oh, and this was just a cool picture I had to throw in. This is another whale that washed up on the beach. This is up in Alaska. And here's a bunch of grizzly bears that came down out of the woods, and they're snacking on this whale. And this is a big deal. Whenever a whale washes up on a beach, it means that like critters don't have to worry about finding food for a while, because this giant 2,000, 3,000 pound meal is just on the beach, and these different critters can come down and get a snack day after day after day. Everything from bears down to squirrels and foxes, and whoever's around can kind of pick at this massive creature that washed up on the beach. Okay, here's just a couple of fun little facts. Ravens are sometimes called wolf birds, probably because, like we talked about earlier, they talk with wolves and they hunt with wolves. So I've seen it in different books. They'll call ravens wolf birds. Pretty cool. And orcas are called wolves of the sea sometimes, wolves of the sea. And that's because they live in packs too. And they hunt together. Orcas do all this kind of cool hunting where they work as a team, where a couple of orcas will swim around in a circle and trap fish in this big ball, and they can't really get out of this circle that the orcas are swimming around. And then two or three more orcas will come up from underneath with their mouths open and eat the fish as they're swimming around in a circle. Or sometimes orcas will go underneath a school of fish and blow a bunch of bubbles, and it confuses the fish. They can't see where they're going, because there's bubbles everywhere. And then some other orcas will swim right through the middle with their mouths open and eat a ton of fish. So like wolves, they kind of live and hunt in packs like that. And they're like these big extended families. Now, how about this? We're going to talk about dogs for a second, because dogs are wolves. How about that? They are the same genetically. They're the same species, even though they look way different. I mean, a husky looks basically like a wolf, but like a Chihuahua or a Pomeranian, like those are technically wolves. And so if you go way back in time, and you're talking about early humans that are walking around Africa and in Europe, the first dogs basically were wolves that started hunting with humans. And just like the ravens and the wolves relationship, humans and wolves figured out that if they worked together, they could hunt really big animals like a woolly mammoth. You can see a big woolly mammoth tusk there. And then everybody could eat. And so they cooperated, and they took down some really, really big animals. So those were the first dogs, were wolves basically, that started living with humans and hunting together. And that's something that humans still do today. They use dogs to help them hunt. Here's a guy right here with his duck collar, and his dog here that's helping him flush the ducks out, and they're hunting ducks together. Or there's hound dogs that tree, raccoons, and then hunters will come along and get the raccoons. There's all kinds of hunting dogs, and that's essentially the same relationship that early humans had with wolves. And that led to all the different dog breeds that you see nowadays. I mean, look at all these different creatures. They started off with like kind of these husky looking things over here in the corner, but over time, I mean, you get all these wild different versions of wolves. And they're all the same species. Okay, thanks for watching, wolves. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it. And I think next week we're going to talk about cougars, because Cyrus had a great suggestion that we talk about cougars. And so I'm excited to talk about that. That'll be a cool companion piece after the wolves. We'll talk about dogs this week, and we'll talk about cats next week. Okay. Bye, everybody.